Hello, everyone. We are back at it again with part two of Anna Karenina. We're here on chapter 8. Let me give you a quick recap, and I've got some juice. Some juice. Hope everyone's doing all right. Let me see. Check the health of everything. Stream condition is excellent. Fantastic. Okay, we're here at chapter 8. I'll give a quick recap of what we've already read in part 1. You can go back and watch part 1 of this series if you want the whole thing with explanations of every little thing that's happened throughout the book so far. But for a short recap, we have our character that we follow first. His name is Steva. He had an affair on his wife. Her name is Dolly. And he had an affair with their children's French governess. They're still quarreling. They're still fighting. There's all kinds of problems in the house of the Oblaskis. There's problems where Dolly's family owns a portion of land that Steva wants to sell, and he feels like now's not quite the right time after he got caught having an affair. They're still fighting. Dolly wants to leave with her 5 children and go live with her parents again, and oh my goodness, everything's going wrong. But he still has to go to work, so he goes to work. He finds his old friend Konstantin Levin, who is another titular character in this series, in this book. And he feels so conflicted. He's a foil character with Steva. He feels so conflicted. He wants to ask Dolly's younger sister, Kitty, to marry him. But he's a bit of a country bumpkin, or at least he feels like he is, and Dolly is this highfalutin young lady of the city. So we are here. Konstantin Levin is staying with his older half-brother, who's a famous Russian author. And he had a philosophical discussion with a philosophy professor. Konstantin Levin walks in. He has a little bit of a banter back and forth. And at the end of that bantering, we are now here at chapter 8. Yippee-ki-yay. Okay, chapter 8. When the professor had gone, Sergei Ivanovich turned to his brother, who is Konstantin Levin's older half-brother. Delighted that you've come. For some reason, is it? How's your farming getting on? Levin knew that his older brother took little interest in his farming and only put question and deference to him, and so he only told him about the sale of wheat and money matters. Levin had meant to tell his brother that the determination to get married and to ask his advice. He had indeed firmly resolved to do so. But after seeing his brother, listening to his conversation with the professor, hearing afterward the unconsciously patronizing tone in which his brother questioned him about agricultural matters, their mother's property had not been divided. Levin took charge of both their shares. Levin felt that he could not, for some reason, begin to talk to him of his intention of marrying. He felt that his brother would not look at it as he would wished him to. "Well, how's your district council doing?" asked Sergei Ivanovich, who was greatly interested in these local boards and attached great importance to them. "I really don't know." "What? Why? Surely you're a member of the board." "No, I'm not a member now. I've resigned," answered Levin. "I am no longer attending the meetings." "What a pity," commented Sergei Ivanovich, frowning. Levin, in self-defense, began to describe what took place in the meetings in his district. "That's how it always is," Sergei Ivanovich, interrupting him. "Well, we Russians are always like that. Perhaps it's a strong point, really, the faculty of seeing our own shortcomings. But we overdo it. We comfort ourselves with irony, which we always have to the tip of our tongues. All I say is, give such rights to our local self-government to any other European people. Why, the Germans or the English would have worked their way to freedom from them, while we simply turn them into ridicule." "But how can it be helped?" said Levin penitently. "It was my last effort, and I did try with all my soul. I can't. I'm no good at it." "It's not that you're no good at it," said Sergei Ivanovich. "It's that you don't look at it as you should." "Perhaps not," Levin answered dejectedly. "Oh, you do know, brother. Nikolai turned up again?" This brother, Nikolai, was the elder brother of Konstantin Levin, half-brother of Sergei Ivanovich, a man utterly ruined, who had dispatched the greater part of his fortune, was living in the strangest and lowest company, and has quarreled with his brothers. "What did you say?" Levin cried with horror. "How do you know?" "Prokofsky said to him in the street, or seen him in the street." "Here in Moscow? Where is he? Do you know?" Levin got up from his chair as though to the point of starting off at once. "I'm sorry I told you," Sergei Ivanovitch, shaking his head at his younger brother's excitement. "I sent to find out here he is living, and sent him his IOU to Turban, which I paid. This is the answer he sent me." And Sergei Ivanovitch took a note from under a paperweight and handed it to his brother. Levin read in the queer, familiar handwriting, "I humbly beg you to leave me in peace. That is the only favor I ask my gracious brothers. Nikolai Levin." Levin read it, and without raising his head, stood the note in his hands opposite Sergei Ivanovitch. There was a struggle in his heart between the desire to forget his unhappy brother for the time, and the consciousness that it would obviously based to do so. Based used to have a different meaning. It used to mean bad. "He obviously wants to offend me," pursued Sergei Ivanovitch, "but he cannot offend me, and I should have wished with all my heart to assist him. But I know it's impossible to do that." Yes, repeated Levin. "I understand and appreciate your attitude towards him, but I shall go and see him." "If you want to, do, but I shouldn't advise it," said Sergei Ivanovitch. "As regards to myself, I have no fear for your doing so. He will not make you quarrel with me, but for your own sake I shall say to you, would you do better not to go? You can't do him any good still. Do as you please." "Very likely I can't do any good, but I feel, especially at such a moment, but that's another thing. I feel I could not be at peace." "Well, that I don't understand," said Sergei Ivanovitch. "One thing I do understand," he added. "It's a lesson in humility. I shall come to look very differently and more charitably on what is called infamous since brother Nikolai has become what he is. You know what he did." "Oh, it's awful, awful," repeated Levin. After obtaining his brother's address from Sergei Ivanovitch's footman, Levin was on the point of setting off at once to see him, but on second thought he decided to put off his visit till evening. The first thing to do is to set his heart at rest and accomplish what he had come to Moscow for. From his brother's Levin he went to the Oblonsky's office, and on setting news to the Shadorowskys from him, he drove to the place where he had been told he might find Kitty. So, Chapter 8, a fairly short chapter. You have a discussion where you see a little bit of Levin's kind of shyness, how he has these moments of absolute forcing himself, wanting to do something, wanting to push through and to do what he resolutely knows he needs to do, but has like an intense kind of hesitancy about him. He wanted to talk to his brother about like, what should I do about asking this girl out, but he didn't. And you see a kind of foil character with Levin, which is his older full brother, and it kind of shows the two different kind of radical liberals of the time. You have the three big political factions that were in power in Russia at the time. Lord have mercy. I don't know if you can hear the wind. I hope not. You can see the really powerful political forces that were going on at the time in Russia, where you have the revolutionary communists, which Nikolai is. You have the more liberal upper middle class professor types in his older half brother Sergei, and then you have conservative types with Levin. So that's an important thing. And so going into this chapter, he's going to go do his duty and go to meet Kitty. Chapter 9. At 4 o'clock, conscious of his throbbing heart, Levin stepped out of a hired sledge to the zoological gardens and turned along the path of the frozen mound and the skating ground, known that he would certainly find her there, as he had seen the Shadorowskys' carriage at the entrance. It was a bright, frosty day. Rows of carriages, sledges, drivers, policemen were standing at the approach. Crowds of well-dressed people with hats bright in the sun swarmed about the entrance and all along the well-swept paths between the little house adorned with the carvings in the Russian style. The old curly birches of the gardens, all their twigs laden with snow, looking as though freshly decked in sacred vestments. He walked along the path towards the skating ground and kept saying to himself, "You mustn't be excited. You must be calm. What's the matter with you? What do you want? Be quiet, stupid," he conjured in his heart. And the more he tried to compose himself, the more breathless he found himself. An acquaintance met him and called him by his name, but Levin didn't even recognize him. He went towards the mounds, whence came the clank of the chains of the sledges as they slipped down and were dragged up, the rumble of the sliding sledges and the sound of merry voices. He walked on a few steps, and the skating grounds lay open. Before his eyes, and at once, amidst all the skaters, he knew her. He knew she was there by the rapture and the terror that had seized on his heart. That's a great line. I love things like the rapture and terror. She was standing talking to a lady at the opposite end of the ground. There was apparently nothing striking either in her dress or her attitude, but for Levin she was easy to find in that crowd as a rose among nettles. Everything was made bright by her. She was the smile that shed light on all round her. It's possible I can go over there on the ice, go up to her, he thought. The place where she stood seemed to him a holy shrine, unapproachable. There was one moment when he was almost retreating, so overwhelmed was he with terror. He had to make an effort to master himself and remind himself that people of all sorts were moving about her, and that he too might come there to skate. He walked down for a long while to avoid looking at her in the sun, but seeing her as one does in the sun without looking. And that shows another little bit of Levin's character, where he really does have low self-esteem, and he really doesn't see Kitty as what she actually is, which is, a woman to be talked to, and he degrades himself so. On the day of the week and at that time of day, people of one set, all accordance with one another, used to meet on the ice. There was a crack skaters there, showing off their skill, learners clinging to chairs with timid, awkward movements, boys and elderly people skating with hygienic motives. They seemed to Levin an elect band of blissful beings because they were here, near her. All the skaters, it seemed, with perfect self-possession. And that's another thing, is that he thinks that literally the whole world revolves around this girl. Skating towards her, skating by her, even spoke to her, and were happy, quite apart from her, enjoying the capital ice and fine weather. Nikolai Shadorowski, Kitty's cousin, in a short jacket and tight trousers, were sitting on the ground seat with his skates on. Seeing Levin, he shouted out to him, "Ah, the first skater in Russia! Been here long? First-rate ice! Do put your skates on!" "I haven't got my skates," Levin answered, marveling at this boldness and ease in her presence, and not for 1 second losing sight of her, thought he did not look at her. He felt as though the sun were coming near him. She was in a corner and turning out her slender feet on the high boots with obvious timidity. She skated towards him. A boy in Russian dress, desperately waving his arms and bowed down to the ground, overtook her. She skated a little uncertainly, taking her hand out of the little muff that had hung on a cord. She held them ready for emergency, and looked towards Levin, whom she had recognized. She smiled at him, and at her own fears. When she had got round the turn, she gave herself a push-off with one foot and skated straight up to Shadorowski, clutching at his arm. She nodded, smiling to Levin. She was more splendid than he had imagined her, and he thought of her. He could call up a vivid picture of her to himself, especially the charm of that little fair head, so freely set, the shapely girlish shoulders, and so full of childish brightness and good humor. The childishness of her expression, together with the delicate beauty of her figure, made up a special charm. That's a little weird, I'm not going to lie. I give you that. That's a little weird. She is young. I think she's 18 or 19. Not super, super young, but he's 34, and she's very young. That's weird. I'm not going to lie. That's pretty weird. But, things like that even happen nowadays, and were a little bit more common then. Not much more. Some people think that, it was super, super common even then, and it really wasn't even then. But especially among upper classes, even now, that's a pretty common thing. I still think it's a little weird. Especially to use the phrase childishness. That's a little odd. It could be the translation. Maybe in a different cultural context, that means something different in Russian, possibly. Where childishness doesn't mean childishness, it means maybe like adolescentness, maybe, or youthfulness. That's a different sort of expression in English than like childishness. But what always struck him in her as something unlooked for was the expression of her eyes, soft, serene, and truthful, and above all her smile, which always transported Levin to the enchanted world where he felt himself softened and tender, and he remembered himself in some days of his early childhood. "Have you been here long?" she asked, giving him her hand. "Thank you," she added, as she picked up the handkerchief that had fallen out of her muff. I've not long. Today I arrived," answered Levin, in his emotion not at once understanding her question. "I was meaning to come and see you," he said, and then, recognizing with that intention he was trying to see her, she promptly overcame with confusion and blushed. "I didn't know you could see," earnestly, and as though wishing to make out the cause of his confusion. Your praise is worthy having. The tradition is kept up here that you are the best of skaters, she said, with her little black-gloved hand brushing the grain of his hoarfrost off her muff. Hoarfrost. That's an interesting word. Yes, I used once to skate with passion. I wanted to reach perfection. You do everything with passion, I think, she said, smiling. I should so like to see how you skate. Put on skates and let us skate together. Skate together? Can that be possible? Thought Levin, gazing at her. I'll put them on directly, he said, and he went off to get skates. See, that's what I love about Tolstoy, is that you have things like this, and it's so funny that it's so, again, it's so accurate. It's so accurate of how, like, that type of person would think, that archetype of person would think. He went off to put on his skates, and after a long while, since you've seen you here, sir, said the attendant, supporting his foot and screwing on the heel of the skate. Except you or none of the gentlemen first-rate skaters. Will that be all right, he said, tightening the strap. Oh, yes, yes, make haste, please, answered Levin, with difficulty restraining the smile of rapture which overspread his face. Yes, he thought. This now is life. This is happiness. Together, she said. Let us skate together. Speak to her now. But that's just why I'm so afraid to speak, because I'm happy now. Happy in hope, anyway. And then... But I must! Away with weakness! Levin rose to his feet, took off his overcoat, and scurrying over the rough ice round the hut, came out on the smooth ice and skated without effort, as it were, by simple exercise of will, increasing and slackening speed and turning his course. He approached with timidity, but again her smile reassured him. She gave him her hand and then set off side by side, going faster and faster, and the more rapidly they moved, the more tightly she gripped his hand. With you I should soon learn. I somehow feel confident in you, she said to him. And I have confidence in myself when you are leaning on me, he said. But it was at once panic-stricken at what he had said, and blushed, and indeed no sooner than he had uttered these words, when I all at once, like the sun going behind a cloud, her face lost all its friendliness. And Levin detected a familiar change in her expression that denoted the work of thought. A crease showed in her smooth brow. Is there anything troubling you? Though I have no right to ask such a question, she added hurriedly. No, I have nothing to trouble me, she responded coldly, and she added immediately, You haven't seen Mill Linen, have you? Not yet. Go and speak to her. She likes you so much. What's wrong? Have I offended her? Lord help me, thought Levin, and he flew towards the old Frenchwoman with the grey ringlets, and she was sitting on a bench, smiling and showing her false teeth. She greeted him as an old friend. Yes, you see, we're growing up, she said to him, glancing towards Kitty, and growing old. Tiny Bear has been big now, pursued the Frenchwoman, laughing, and as she reminded him of his joke about the 3 young ladies whom she had compared to the 3 bears in the English nursery tale. You remember that's what you used to call them. He remembered absolutely nothing, but she had been laughing at the joke for 10 years now and was fond of it. Now go and skate, go and skate! Our Kitty has learned to skate nicely, hasn't she? Then Levin darted up to Kitty, her face no longer stern. Her eyes looked at him as the same sincerity and friendliness, but Levin fancied that in her friendliness there was a certain note of deliberate composure, and he felt depressed. After talking a little while to her old governess and her peculiarities, she questioned him on his life. Surely you must be dull in the country in the winter, aren't you? She said. No, I'm not dull. I'm very busy, he said, feeling that she was holding him in check by her composed tone, which she would have not have to force to break through, just as it had been the beginning of the winter. Are you going to stay in town long? Kitty questioned him. I don't know, he answered, not thinking of what he was saying. The thought that he were held in check by her tone and quiet friendliness, as he would end by going back again without deciding anything, come to his mind, and resolved to make a struggle against it. How is it you don't know? I don't know. It depends on you, he said, and was immediately horror-stricken at his own words. Oh, no! Oh, the drama! Whether it was that she had heard his words or that she did not want to hear them, she made a sort of stumble, twice struck out, and hurriedly skated away from him. She skated up to Mill Linden, and said something to her, and went towards the pavilion, where the ladies took off their skates. My God, what have I done? Merciful God, help me, guide me, said Levin, praying inwardly, and at the same time feeling a need of violent exercise. He skated about, describing inner and outer circles. He has like an autistic tick. Oh, shit. I love things like that. That's so funny. Because, again, a character like Levin would do something like that. he gets really nervous and he's like, oh, I gotta do something. I feel bad. I need to do something. At the moment, one of the young men, the best of the skaters of the day, came out the coffee house in his skates, with a cigarette in his mouth, taking a run. He dashed down the step in his skates, crashing and bounding up and down. He flew down, and without even changing the position of his hands, and skated away over the ice. "Ah, that's a new trick," said Levin, as he promptly ran up to the top to do his new trick. "Don't break your neck! It needs practice!" Nikolai Serbowski shouted off to him. Shouterbowski, excuse me. Levin went to the steps, took a run from above the best he could, and dashed down, preserving his balance in the unwanted movement with his hands. On the last step he stumbled, and barely touching the ice with his hand, with a violent effort recovered himself and skated off, laughing. "How splendid! How nice he is!" Kitty was thinking at that time. She came out of the pavilion with Millie Linden and looked towards him with a smile of quiet affection, as she thought he were a favorable brother. "Can it be my fault? Can I have done anything wrong? They talked of flirtation. I know it's not it's not he that I love, but still I am happy with him. He's so jolly. Only, why did he say that?" she mused, catching sight of Kitty going away and her mother meeting her at the steps. Levin, flushed from his rapid exercise, stood still and pondered a moment. He took off his skates and overtook the mother and daughter at the entrance of the gardens. "Delighted to see you, Princess Shouterbowskia. On the Thursday we are home as always. Today, then? We shall be pleased to see you," the princess said stiffly, and stiffliness hurt Kitty, and she could not resist the desire to smooth over her mother's coldness. She turned her head and with a smile said, "Goodbye till this evening." At the moment, Stefan Arkonovitch, in his hat cocked on one side and beaming face and eyes, strode into the garden like a conquering hero. Oh my goodness. Can you guys hear? I don't know if the wind... I might need to shut my window. It's just so hot. It's fine. I'll shut the window. It's driving me nuts anyway. Okay. Goodbye till this evening. At the moment, Stefan Arkonovitch, his hat cocked on one side, with beaming face and eyes, strode into the gardens like a conquering hero. But as he approached his mother-in-law, he responded with a mournful and crestfallen tone to her inquiries about Dolly's health. After a little subdued and dejected conversation with his mother-in-law, he threw out his chest again and put his arms up into Levin's. "Well, shall we set off?" he asked. "I've been thinking about you all this time, and I'm very, very glad you've come," he said, looking at him in the face with a significant air. "Yes, come along," answered Levin, in ecstasy, hearing an unceasing the sound of the voice saying, "Goodbye till this evening," seeing the smile with which it was said. "To the England or to the Hermitage?" "I don't mind which." "All right, then, the England," said Stefan Arkonovitch, selecting the restaurant because he owed more there than at the Hermitage, and consequently considering it meant to avoid it. "Have you got a sledge? That's first rate, for I sent my carriage home." The friends hardly spoke all the way. Levin was wondering what that change in Kitty's expression had meant, and alternately assuring himself that there was hope, and falling into despair, seeing clearly that his hopes were insane. And yet, all the while he felt himself quite another man, utterly unlike what he had been before her smile and those words. "Goodbye till this evening." Stefan Arkonovitch was absorbed during the drive in composing the menu of the dinner. "You like Tourbeau, don't you?" said Levin as they were arriving. "Eh?" responded Levin. "Tourbeau? Yes, I'm awfully fond of Tourbeau." All right. Chapter 9, summary. Okay. Chapter 9 was the first time we see Kitty Shouterbowsky, the lady that Mr. Konstantin Levin is fancied. If you remember earlier in one of the chapters, he talks about how he spent a 2-month period where before he had went out into the country where he would go every day and they'd spend all kinds of time together and they felt so close. And then one day he just really psyched himself out of being able to marry Kitty because he's just such a lowly creature who's scurries about the earth, not even worthy to look upon this wonderful otherworldly character known as Kitty Shouterbowsky. And so he ran off into the country, never really to speak to her again, just kind of left. And now he's coming back out of nowhere and went up to her. He heard from Steva, who is Stefan Arkonovitch, who is married to Dolly, Kitty's older sister. He said, hey, she usually likes to go skating on Thursday afternoons here at the zoological gardens. I'm sure if you show up there, she'll probably be there and you can talk to her there. So he goes up to her, they skate for a little bit, and she says, so how long are you going to be here? He goes, well, that depends on you. That kind of wigs her out. She leaves, and then he feels like a rage with himself. So then he starts skating around like a maniac, and then he sees Kitty's mother. He says, hey, it's nice to see you, blah, 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 blah. Why don't you come over tonight, she says. And then he sees Stefan Arkonovich. He shows up to the zoological gardens because they had plans for dinner, and they're going to the England, which I'm guessing is an English restaurant or something like it. The Russian equivalent, an 19th century Russian equivalent to an English restaurant. So here we are, chapter 10, Stefan and Levin here at this restaurant known as the England. Chapter 10. When Levin went into the restaurant with Oblowski, he could not help but noticing a certain peculiarity of expression, as it were a restrained radiance about the face and whole figure of Stefan Arkonovich. Oblowski, who is the last name of Stefan Arkonovich, took off his overcoat and with his hat over one ear walked into the dining room, giving directions to the Tartar waiters. Tartars were, they're a different ethnicity to Russians. They live in the Caucasus, which is in the kind of southwestern parts of Russia. They're like an Asiatic, kind of Middle Eastern ethnic group. And they're kind of related to Turks. And they were usually, minority, second-class sort of citizens in the Russian Empire. So the Tartar waiters, who were clustered about him in evening coats, bearing napkins, bowing to the right and left to people he met, and here everywhere joyously greeting acquaintances, he went up to the sideboard for a preliminary appetizer of fish and vodka, and said to the painted Frenchwoman, decked in ribbons, lace, and ringlets, behind the counter, something so amusing that even the Frenchwoman was moved to genuine laughter. We all know French people don't actually laugh. They all just Levin, for his part, refrained from taking any vodka simply because he felt such a loathing of that Frenchwoman, all made up, it seemed, of false hair, pondeur de riz, and vingon de toilette. Yeah, because it's a TTE, you say the T. Vinaigre de toilette. He made haste to move away from her, as from a dirty place. I would also, if I was around a French person. That was a joke. His whole soul was filled with memories of Kitty, and there was a smile of triumph and happiness shining in his eyes. This way, Your Excellency. Please, Your Excellency won't be disturbed here, said the particularly perniciousness, white-headed old Tartar with immense hips and coattails gaping widely behind. Walk in, Your Excellency, he said to Levin, by the way of showing his respect to Stefan Arkonovich, being attentive to his guest as well, instantly flinging a fresh cloth over the round table under the bronze chandelier, though it's already a tablecloth on it, pushing up velvet chairs, and came up to a standstill before Stefan Arkonovich with a napkin and a bill of fare in his hands, awaiting his commands. If you prefer it, Your Excellency, a private room will be free directly. Prince Goldston with a lady. Fresh oysters have come in. Ah, oysters! Stefan Arkonovich became thoughtful. How if we were to change our program, Stefan, he said, keeping his finger on the bill of fare. His face expressed serious hesitation. Are the oysters good? Mind now. They're Flensburg, Your Excellency. We've no Ostend. Flensburg will do, but are they fresh? Only arrived yesterday. Well then, if we were to begin with oysters, and so change the whole program, eh? It's just the same to me. I should like a cabbage soup and porridge better than anything, but of course there's nothing like that here. Porridge à la Russe, Your Honor would like, said the Tartar, bending over to Levin like a nurse speaking to a child. No, joking apart, whatever you choose is sure to be good. I've been skating and I'm hungry, and I don't imagine. He added, detecting a look of dissatisfaction on Oblowski's face, that I shan't appreciate your choice. I am fond of good things. I should hope so, after all. It's one of the pleasures of life, said Stefan Arkonovich. Well then, my friend, you should give us 2, or better say 3 dozen oysters. Clear soup with vegetables. Pinatar, prompted the Tartar, but Stefan Arkonovitch apparently did not care to allow him the satisfaction of giving the French names of the dishes. With vegetables in it, you know, the tourbeau with thick sauce, then roast beef. And mind it's good. Yes, the capons, perhaps, then sweets. The Tartar recalling that it was Stefan Arkonovitch's way to not call the dishes by the names in the French bill of fare. Did not repeat them after him, but could not resist rehearsing the whole menu to himself according to the bill. Soup binata, torbe, source, beau, beau maquis, pola de l'estrange, don't mind my French. It's horrible. And then instantly, as though worked by springs, laying down one bound bill of fare, he took up another, the list of wines, and submitted it to Stefan Arkonovitch. What shall we drink? What you like. Only not too much champagne, said Levin. What? To start with? You're right, though. I dare say. Do you like the white seal? Cache blanc, prompted the Tartar. Very well, then. Give us the brand with the oysters, and then we'll see. Yes, sir. And what with the table vine? Yeah, he's a Tartar. He doesn't really speak French. I mean, he might speak French. Tartars can speak French, but he probably speaks Tartar and Russian. And maybe he might speak French. Can you give us nuts? Oh no, better the classic chalvis. Yes, sir, and your cheese, your excellency. Oh yes, Parmesan. Or would you like another? No, it's all the same to me. And unable to suppress a smile. The Tartar ran off with flying coattails, and in 5 minutes darted in with a dish of opened oysters with mother-of-pearl shells and a bottle between his fingers. Stefan Arkonovitch crushed the starchy napkin, tucked it into his waistcoat, and settling his arms comfortably, started with the oysters. Not bad, he said, stripping the oysters from its pearly shell with a silver fork and swallowing them one after another. Not bad, he repeated, turning his dewy, brilliant eyes from Stefan to the Tartar. Levin ate the oysters indeed, though the white bread and the cheese would have pleased him better. But he was admiring Oblaski. Even the Tartar, uncorking the bottle and pouring the sparkling wine into the delicate glasses, glanced at Stefan Arkonovitch and settled his white cravat with an imperceivable smile of satisfaction. You don't care much for oysters, do you? Said Stefan Arkonovitch, emptying his wine-glass. Or are you worried about something, eh? He wanted Levin to be in good spirits, but it was not that Levin was not in good spirits. He was ill at ease. And what he had had in his soul, he felt sore and uncomfortable in the restaurant, in the midst of private rooms where the men were drinking with ladies, and all this fuss and bustle, and the surrounding of bronze, gas, and waiters. All of it was offensive to him, and he was afraid of sullying what the soul was brimful of. Yes, I am, but besides, all this bothers me, he said. You can't conceive how queer it all seems to me in a country person like me. As queer as the gentleman's nails I saw at your place. Yeah, I saw how much interested you were in poor Grimovitch's nails, said Stefan Arkonovitch, laughing. It's too much for me, responded Levin. Don't try now, and put yourself in my place. Take the point of view of a country person. We in the country trying to bring our hands into such a state that will be most convenient for working with. So we cut our nails, sometimes we turn up our sleeves, and here people purposely let their nails grow long as they will and link up small saucers by the way of studs so that they can do nothing with their hands. Stefan Arkonovitch smiled gaily. Ah, yes, that's just a sign that he has no need to do coarse work. His work is to do the mind. Now, actually, believe it or not, of course now, men never really, it's not seen as a masculine thing or something that a classically or well-dressed man would have long fingernails. But at this time, and it wasn't just a Russian thing, and for quite a while in the 18th or in the 19th century, but especially in the 18th century in Western Europe, maybe not in Russia, men would grow out their nails and they would also wear heels. And that women started wearing those things because men wore them that way. And men would grow out their nails and I think even paint them. I could be wrong about that, though. But men first started the trend of growing out nails. In this, it shows. Small cells ability. Yeah. He does work with the mind. Maybe it's still queer to me. Just at this moment, it seems queer to me that we country folks try to get our meals over as soon as we can, so as to be ready for our work, and while we're here trying to drag out our meals as long as possible, and with the object of eating oysters. Why, of course, objected Stefan Arkonovitch, but that's just the aim of civilization, to make everything a source of enjoyment. Well, if that's the aim, I'd rather be a savage. That's a great line. If that's the aim of civilization, I'd rather be a savage. I think that's a great line. And so you are a savage. All you Levinses are savages. Levin sighed. He remembered his brother Nikolai, and he felt ashamed and sore, and he felt scowled, but Oblasky, being to speak of a subject which at once drew his attention. "Oh, I say, are you going tonight to our people, the Shadorowskis, I mean?" he said, his eyes sparkling significantly as he pushed away the empty rough shells and drew the cheese toward him. "Yes, I shall certainly go," replied Levin, "though I fancy the princess is not very warm in her invitation." "What nonsense! That's her manner. Come, boy, the soup! That's her manner. Grande dame. The great woman, I think. Dame, grande dame," said Stefan Arkonovitch. "I'm coming too, but I have to go to the Countess Bonia's rehearsal. Come, isn't it true that you're a savage? How do you explain the sudden way in which you vanished from Moscow? The Shadorowskis were continually asking me about you, as though I ought to know. The only thing I know is that you always do what no one else does." Yes. It's a Chad meme right there. Levin, blah. So you're telling me that you are a savage and you do the things that no one else will do? Yes, said Levin, slowly and with emotion. You're right, I am a savage. Only my savageness is not in having gone away, but in coming now. Now I have come. Oh, what a lucky fellow you are, broke in Stefan Arkonovitch, looking in Levin's eyes. Why? I know a gallant steed by token sure, and by his eyes I know a youth in love, declaimed Stefan Arkonovitch. Everything is before you. Why is it over for you already? No, not exactly over. Not over exactly, but the future is yours, and the present is mine, and the present, well, it's not all that it might be. How so? Well, things go wrong. See, they both want to talk about something, and they're both kind of beating around the bush to get to what they both want to talk about. Oh, things go wrong, but I don't want to talk about myself. Yeah, you do. And besides, I can't explain it all, said Stefan Arkonovitch. Well, why have you come to Moscow, then? Hi! Take away! He called to the Tartar. You guess? Responded Levin, his eyes like deep wells of light fixed on Stefan Arkonovitch. I guess, but I can't be the first to talk about it. You can see by the weather. By that whether I guess right or wrong, said Stefan Arkonovitch, gazing at Levin with a subtle smile. Well, and what have you say to me? Said Levin, in a quivering voice, feeling that all the muscles of his face were quivering too. How do you look at the question? Said Stefan Arkonovitch, slowly emptying his glass of Calibus, never taking his eyes off Levin. I? Said Stefan Arkonovitch. There's nothing I desire so much as that. Nothing! It would be the best thing that could be. But you're not making a mistake. You know that we're speaking of, said Levin, piercing with him with his eyes. You think it's possible. I think it's possible. Why not possible? No, do you really think it's possible? No, tell me. All of you think, oh, but if refusal in store for me, I indeed feel sure. Why should you think that? Said Stefan Arkonovitch, smiling in his excitement. It seems so to me it seems so to me sometimes that will be so awful for me and for her too. Oh well, anyway, there's nothing awful in it for a girl. Every girl's proud of an offer. Yes, every girl, but not she. Stefan Arkonovitch smiled, and so well he knew that feeling of Levin's, that for him all the girls in the world were divided into two classes. One class, all the girls in the world except her, and those girls with all sorts of human weakness and very ordinary girls. The other class, she alone. That's the thing, and that is true. That is exactly how Levin looks at the situation, that she's a completely separate creature from him, from other women, from other human beings, and it's a very sad state of affairs that's exactly how he sees things. And that's his biggest problem, is that he, she might, and she is, she's a nice girl and blah 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 blah, but he can't be with her because he doesn't even think of her as a human being. Having no weakness of all of any sort and higher than all humanity. Stay, there's some sauce, he said, holding back Levin's hand as he pushed away the sauce. Levin obediently helped himself to sauce, but would not let Stefan Arkonovitch go on with his dinner. No, stop a moment, he said. You must understand that this is a question of life and death for me. No, it's not. That's the other thing, is that he's putting so much importance on this one thing, but it's literally not a matter of life and death. I have never spoken to anyone of this, and there's no one I could speak of it to except you. You know we're utterly unlike each other, different tastes and views and everything, but I know you're fond of me and understand me, and that's why I like you awfully. But for God's sake, be quite straightforward with me. I tell you what I think, said Stefan Arkonovitch, smiling, but I'll say no more. My wife is a wonderful woman, ... Yeah, she's so wonderful that you run around with another lady. Stefan Arkonovitch sighed, remembering his position with his wife, and, after a moment of silence, resumed. She has a gift of foreseeing things. She sees right through people, but that's not all. She knows what will come to pass, especially in the way of marriages. She foretold, for instance, that Princess Shahovskia would marry Brethtlin, and no one would believe it, and it came to pass. And she's on your side. How do you mean? It's not only that she likes you, she says that Kitty is certain to be your wife. And these words, Levin's face suddenly lit up with a smile not far from the tears of emotion. She says that, cried Levin. I always said she was an exquisite, your wife. There, that's enough. Enough said about it. He said, getting up from his seat. All right, but sit down, said Levin. Could not sit down. He walked off with his firm tread twice up and down the little cage of a room, blinked his eyelids and his tears might not fall, and only then sat back down at the table. You must understand, he said. It's not love. I've been in love, but it's not that. It's not my feeling, but a sort of force outside me has taken possession of me. I went away, you see, because I made up my mind that I could never be, you understand, as a happiness that does not come on earth, but I've struggled with myself. I see there's no living without it, and it must be settled. What did you go away for? Stop a minute. The thoughts that come crowding on me, the question one must ask oneself. Listen. You can't imagine what I've done for me. What you've done for me by what you said. I'm so happy that I've become positively hateful. I've forgotten everything. I've heard today that my brother Nikolai, you know, he's here, and I had even forgotten him. It seemed to me that he's happy too, in a sort of madness, but one thing's awful. Here, you've been married. You know the feeling. It's awful that we, old, with a past, not of love, but of sins, are brought all at once so near to a creature pure and innocent. It's loathsome, and that's why one can't help feeling oneself unworthy. Oh well, you've not many sins on your conscience. Alas, all the same, said Levin. When, with loathing, I go over my life, I shudder and curse and bitterly regret it. Yes! What would you have? The world's made so, said Stefan Arkonovitch. The one comfort is alike the prayer, which I always likened. Forgive me, not according to my unworthiness, but according to thy loving kindness. I think that's a nice little prayer. That's the only way she can forgive me. Okay. Probably don't need to do a chapter 10. I'll probably do a chapter 10 and 11 together. I think that makes sense because chapter 10 they haven't left the little bar room yet. So I'll wait till they leave the restaurant, and then I'll do a chapter. I'll do a restaurant wrap up. Chapter 10 was about Levin's problems, and I think chapter 11 will be about Stefan's problems. So chapter 11. Levin emptied his glass, and they were silent for a while. There's another thing I ought to tell you. Do you know Vronsky? Stefan Arkonovitch asked Levin. No, I don't. Why do you ask? Give us another bottle, said Stefan Arkonovitch, directed to the Tartar, who was filling up their glasses and fidgeted round them just when he was not wanted. Why, you ought to know Vronsky, as that's one of your rivals. Who's Vronsky? Said Levin, with his face so suddenly transformed from the look of childlike ecstasy which Oblasky had just been adorning to the angry and unpleasant expression. Vronsky is one of the sons of Count Kryl Ivanovitch Vronsky, one of the finest specimens in the gilded youngs of Petersburg. I made his acquaintance in the Tiver, where I was there as on official business, and he came there for to levy of recruitments. Fearfully rich, handsome, great connections, and aide de camp, and with all that very nice, good-natured fellow. And he's more than simply a good-natured fellow, as I've found out here. He's a cultivated man, too, and very intelligent. He's a man who will make his mark. Levin scowled and was dumb. Dumb as in kid didn't talk. Well, he turned up here soon after you'd gone, and as I can see, he's over head and ears in love with Kitty, and you should know that her mother— Excuse me! But I know nothing, said Levin, frowning gloomily, and immediately he recollected his brother Nikolai, and how hateful he was to have him be able to forget him. You wait a bit, said Stefan Arkonovitch, smiling and touching his hand. I've told you what I know, and I repeat this in delicate and tender manner. As far as you can conjecture, as far as one can conjecture, I believe the chances are in your favor. Levin dropped back in his chair. His face was pale. But I would advise you to settle the thing as soon as may be, persuaded Oblonsky, filling up his glass. No thanks, I can't drink any more, said Levin, pushing away his glass. I shall be drunk. Come, tell me how you're getting on, he went on, obviously anxious to change the conversation. One word more. In any case, I advise you to settle the question soon. Tonight, I don't advise you to speak, said Stefan Arkonovitch. Go round tomorrow morning, make an offer in due form, and God bless you. Oh, do you still think of coming to me for some shooting? Come next spring, do, said Levin. Now his whole soul was full of remorse that he had begun this conversation with Stefan Arkonovitch, a feeling such that was profaned by talk of the rivalry of some Petersburg officer, of the suppositions and the counsels of Stefan Arkonovitch. Stefan Arkonovitch smiled. He knew that he was passing in Levin's soul. I'll come by some day, he said, but women, my boy, they're the pivot everything turns upon. Things are in a bad way with me, very bad. And all through women. Tell me frankly now, he pursed, picked up a cigar, and keeping one hand on his glass, give me your advice. Why, what is it? I'll tell you. Suppose you're married, and you love your wife, but you're fascinated by another woman. Excuse me, but I'm absolutely unable to comprehend how, just as I can't comprehend how I could now, after all my dinner, go straight to a baker's shop and steal a roll. Stefan Arkonovitch's eyes sparkled more than usual. Why not? A roll is something smells so good, and one can't resist. Here's some stuff in German that I'm not even going to attempt. If you would like to know what this says, Google it. As he said this, Stefan Arkonovitch smiled subtly. Levin, too, could not help smiling. Yes, but joking apart, resumed Stefan Arkonovitch, you must understand that the woman is a sweet, gentle, loving creature, poor and lonely, and has sacrificed everything. Now, when the thing's done, you don't see. One can't possibly cast her off, even supposing one parts from her, so as not to break up one's family life. Still, can one help feeling for her, setting her on her feet, softening her lot? Well, you must excuse me there. You know to tell me all women are divided into two classes. At least no. Truer to say, there are women and there are— I've never seen exquisite fallen beings, and I've never shall see them, but such creatures as the painted Frenchwomen at the counter with the ringlets are vermin to my mind, and all fallen women are the same. But the Magdalene? Ah, drop that. Christ, Magdalene being Mary Magdalene, who was a prostitute by which Christ had redeemed. Ah, drop that. Christ would never have said such words if he had known that they were to be abused. Of all the gospel, and when he's talking about Mary Magdalene, when he, the prostitute in the Bible that Christ had redeemed and had followed around her, she was going to be stoned to death for being a prostitute, and he said to the crowd, for all of you who are without sin, cast the first stone, and none of them cast a stone. And then Mary Magdalene was freed, and then followed Christ after that. So then Levin, Christ would have never said those words if he had known that they were to be abused. He referring to he without sin cast the first stone. And that is Levin's opinion, that if he would have known the amount of times people use them to justify their bad behavior, he would have never said them. Because, and I do think that there's something to that there is no redemption without repentance, is something that I've heard in relation to that you have to first feel bad and apologize for the negative action that you've done, which you have to keep in mind. Stefan has kind of sort of apologized. Oh, he did apologize, but it was kind of a half-hearted sort of thing. Anyway, of all the Gospels, the words are the only ones remembered. However, I'm not saying so much of what I think as to what I feel. I have loathsome for fallen women. You're afraid of spiders, and I of these vermin. Most likely you've not made a study of spiders and don't know their character, and so it is with me. It's very well for you to talk like that. It's very much like that gentleman in Dickens, who used to fling all difficult questions over the right shoulder, but to deny the fact is no answer. What's to be done? You tell me that. What's to be done? Your wife gets older, while you're full of life. Before you've time to look round, you feel that you can't love your wife with love, however much you may esteem her. And then, all at once, love turns up. And you're done for, Stefan Arkonovitch said with weary despair. Levin half smiled. Yes, you're done for, resumed Oblaski. But what's to be done? Don't steal rolls. Stefan Arkonovitch laughed outright. That's a great line. I've used that before. I think that's perfectly ripe for allusions, where you say, blah, 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 blah. Well, what if, I want to do this bad thing? What would you do? Blah, 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 blah. Don't steal rolls. Oh, moralist, you must understand. There are two women. One insists only on her rights, and those rights are your love, which you can't give her. And the other sacrifices everything for you, and asks for nothing. What are you to do? How are you to act? There's a fearful tragedy in it. If you care for my profession of faith as regards to that, I'll tell you that I don't believe there is any tragedy about it, and that is why. To my mind, love, both sorts of love, which you remember Plato defines in his Banquet, served as a test of men. Some men only understand one sort, and some only understand the other. And those who know the non-Platonic love have no need to talk of tragedy. In such love there can be no sort of tragedy. I'm much obliged for the gratification in my humble respects. That's all the tragedy. And I'm Platonic love, there can be no tragedy, because in that love all is clear and pure, because, in that instant Levin recollected his own sins, an inner conflict he had lived through, and he had added unexpectedly, but perhaps you're right. Very likely I don't know. It's this, don't you see, said Stefan Arkonovitch. You're very much all of one piece. That's your strong point, and you're failing. You have a character that's all of one piece, and you want the whole of your life to be a piece too. But that's not how it is. You despise public official work because you want the reality to be invariably corresponding to all that is with the aim. And that is not how it is. You want a man's work too, always to have a definite aim, and love and family life always to be undivided. And that's not how it is. All the variety, all the charm, all the beauty of life is made up of light and shadow. Levin laughed and made no reply. He was thinking of his own affairs and did not hear Oblaski. And suddenly both of them felt as though they were friends, and though they could have been dining and drinking together, which should have drawn them closer, yet each was thinking only of his own affairs, and they had nothing to do with the other. Oblaski had more than one experience with this extreme sense of aloofness instead of intimacy, coming on after dinner, and he knew what to do in such cases. "Bill!" he called, and he went up to the next room, where he promptly came across the aide-de-camp and his acquaintance, and dropped the conversation with him about the actress and her protector. And at once in the conversation was the aide-de-camp. Oblaski had a sense of relaxation and relief after the conversation with Levin, which always put him to too great a mental and spiritual strain. When the Tartar appeared with a bill for 26 rubles and odd kopecks, besides a tip for himself, Levin, who would, after another time, had been horrified, like anyone from the country, to his share of 14 rubles, did not notice it and paid, and set off home afterwards to dress and go to the Charterowskis, where to decide his fate. Chapter 12. Okay, so, like I said, I'll do a combined little Chapter 10, Chapter 11 review here. Because they both happen in the same place. I would have also had it split like that, where Chapter 10, we go over, what's his name's problems? Levin's problems, and the other chapter going over Steva's problems. Goodness gracious. So, the first half, we go over Levin's problems. And so he's sitting, they're ordering dinner. You meet a French woman when they first walk in, which Steva kind of playfully flirts with. They go sit down. They order some oysters, which are fresh from Germany. And but the whole meat of the chapter is Levin kind of dances around, well, I want to ask Kitty to marry me. What do you think? To which Steva says, well, my wife is pretty good at calling these sorts of marriages, and she had said before, yes, that's probably going to happen. And she's been right before. So Levin feels fantastic. Oh my goodness, I might actually have something here. But to tamper his excitement, she has another suitor, and his name is Vronsky, and he has connections and money and wits and charm and everything. He's a pretty good guy, and he's been kind of flirting, hanging around, so you need to keep your eye out for that. But the odds are still in your favor, so don't feel like, but of course, Levin, he catastrophizes this. Oh my God, if there's any other man that might possibly be courting this woman, I have no chance because I'm a lowly worm on the ground. That's pretty much what happens in chapter 10. So move on to chapter 11, and that's where it splits, and we go on to Steva talking about his family problems. In that, they kind of talk, and he doesn't really outright say on and on and on what he did, but he made it pretty clear to Oblasky, and like I said during the reading, I think that's a great line. Don't steal roles. So... But you also have the kind of talk of platonic love from Mr. Levin, which is philia, the highest form, the highest platonic love, which you love someone for their character. And it's a close, intimate friendship. That is platonic love. And you see again how Levin sees things as he's a very of one piece, as Steva says. He's of a one mind, and he wants everything to be internally consistent, where Steva sees things as, well, again, he's trying to make more of a gray area where he can kind of do what he likes and what he wants. And again, Tolstoy is great because Tolstoy did not believe anything close to that sort of mentality. He believed very firmly in the moralist camp. He was a very Christian person and wrote many tracts about Christianity. And so, but he is able to show how someone like Steva would justify his beliefs, or maybe not make him a complete... He doesn't make anyone a caricature or portray anyone, I think, in less than a nuanced light, and doesn't make anyone fully great or fully bad. Levin has problems. He has problems with his love life, and so that would also mean that the way he views love is also flawed. And Steva, too, has problems with his love life. Therefore, the way he views his love life is in love, and the nature of that is probably also wrong. And I think that's something that Tolstoy would be talking about. So they have this conversation about love where they make different allusions to different things. Yeah, it's a great chapter, these two chapters. It's probably the best chapters with Steva and Levin. And after Levin goes back to the country, I think it's one of the I do think he comes back to go shooting, and then they have another couple scenes, but I don't think they were ever as good or as deep as those. They're pretty good, and they kind of touch upon, and again, we'll get to that, and I don't want to, it's not really a spoiler, but they go on to talk about things like liberating the serfs in their next meeting. So whenever Levin and Steva come together, there's always a pretty interesting conversation, like a deeper conversation that happens in the book. And I always really appreciate those chapters. Anyway, chapter 12, going for an hour. I might do maybe this chapter and the next. We'll definitely get through the proposal. We'll definitely get through proposal today. All right. Chapter 12. The young princess Kitty Shutterbaskia was 18, so she's 18. I knew she was young, but not young. It was the first winter that she had been out in the world. Her success in society had been greater of that of either of her elder sisters, and greater even than her mother had anticipated. To say nothing of the young men who danced at the Moscow balls being almost all in love with Kitty. Two serious suitors were already in this first winter made their appearance. Levin, and immediately after his departure, Count Vronsky. Levin's appearance at the beginning of the winter, his frequent visits, evident love for Kitty, had led to the first serious conversations between Kitty's parents as to her future and disputes between them. The prince was on Levin's side, and he said he wished for nothing better than for Kitty. The princess, for her part, going round the question in the manner peculiar to women, maintained that Kitty was too young and that Levin had done nothing to prove that he had serious intentions, that Kitty felt no great attraction to him, and the other side issues. Now, of course, I think we should also bring up and maybe have a little bit of a conversation that at this time, women couldn't get married without the consent of their parents. And that was, well, actually, no, and that comes up later. It was going away. Legally, that was no longer the case. Parents could no longer legally choose who their children married. But that had not gone on for very long. I think it was about a 20-year ago sort of thing that it had been legislated different. At the same time, the liberation of the serfs. So there was, big social reforms. I think that was after Catherine the Great. Is that under Peter the Great? I could be wrong. I'm probably totally wrong. My Russian history is not perfect. It's not great. It's not even good. It's pretty bad. But I know around that same time there was, oh my goodness, there was a czar who was really into liberal reforms. I think it was the same guy that instituted the Duma, the Russian parliament at the time. Oh my goodness. So, same time, but of course, with social change, things don't instantly change. You have legal change and then things maintain for a little while, and so we're kind of in this transition period. With Kitty and her parents still kind of, deciding together who she's going to marry. And other side issues, but she did not state the principal point, which was that she looked for a better match for her daughter, and that Levin was not to her liking, and she did not understand him. When Levin had abruptly departed, the princess was delighted, and said to her husband triumphantly, "You see, I was right." When Vronsky appeared on the scene, she was still more delighted, confirmed in her opinion that Kitty was to make not simply a good, but a brilliant match. In her mother's eyes, there could be no comparison between Vronsky and Levin. She disliked in Levin his strange and uncompromising opinions, and his shyness in society, founded, as she supported, on his pride and his queer sort of life. She considered it absorbed in cattle and peasants. She did not like it very much that he, who was in love with her daughter and had kept coming to the house for 6 weeks as though he were wanting for something, inspecting, as though he were afraid he might be doing them too great an honor by making an offer, and did not realize that a man who had continually visited a house where there was a young unmarried girl is bound to make his intentions clear, and suddenly, without doing so, he disappeared. It's as well he's not attractive enough for Kitty to have fallen in love with him, thought the mother. Vronsky, satisfied with all the mother's desires, very wealthy, clever, of an aristocratic family, on the high road to a brilliant career in the army and at court, and a fascinating man. Nothing better could be wished for. Vronsky openly flirted with Kitty at balls, danced with her, and came continually to the house. Consequently, there could be no doubt of the seriousness of his intentions, but, in spite of that, the mother had spent the whole of that winter in a state of a terrible anxiety and agitation. Princess Shutterbaskia had herself been married 30 years ago, her aunt arranging the match. Her husband, about whom everything was well known beforehand, had come, looked at his future bride, and had been looked at. The matchmaking aunt had ascertained and communicated their mutual impressions. That impression had been favorable. Afterwards, on a day fixed beforehand, the expected offer was made to her parents, and accepted. All that had passed very simply and easily, so it seemed at least to the princess. But over her own daughter she had felt how far from simple and easy is the business, apparently so commonplace, of marrying off one's daughters. The panic that had been lived through, the thoughts that had been brewed over, the money that had been wasted, the disputes with her husbands over marrying the two elder girls, Daria and Natalia. Now, since the youngest had come out, she is going through the same terrors, the same doubts, and still more violent quarrels with her husband than she had over the elder girls. The old prince, like all fathers indeed, was exceedingly punctilious on the score of the honor and reputation of his daughters. He was irrationally jealous over his daughters, especially over Kitty, who was his favorite. After every turn, he had scenes with the princess for compromising her daughters. The princess had grown accustomed to this already with her own daughters, but now she felt that there was more ground for the prince's touchiness. She saw that of late years much had changed in the manners of society, that a mother's duties had become still more difficult. She had saw the girls of Kitty's age form some sort of clubs, went to some sort of lectures, mixed freely in men's society, drove about the streets alone. Many of them didn't curtsy, and was most important thing, all the girls were firmly convinced to choose their husbands was their own affairs and not their parents'. Marriages aren't made nowadays as it used to be, and the thought was said by all the young girls and even by their elders. And how marriages were made now, the princess could not learn from anyone. The French fashion of the parents arranging their children's future was not accepted. It was condemned. The English fashion of the complete independence of girls was also not accepted, and was not possible in Russian society. The Russian fashion of matchmaking by the offices of intermandate persons was for some reason considered unseemly. It was ridiculous by everyone and by the princess herself. But how girls were to be married and how the parents were to marry them, no one knew. Everyone with whom the princess had chanced to discuss the matter said the same thing. Mercy on us, it's high time in our day to cast off all the old-fashioned business. It's the young people to have to marry, and not their parents, and so we ought to leave the young people to arrange it as they choose. It was very easy for anyone to say that who had no daughters, but the princess realized that in the process of getting to know each other, her daughter might fall in love with someone who did not care to marry her or who was quite unfit to be her husband. And however much it was instilled on the princess that in our times young people ought to arrange their lives for themselves, she was unable to believe it, just as she would have been unable to believe that, at any time whatsoever, the most suitable plaything for children 5 years old ought to be loaded pistols, and so the princess was more uneasy over Kitty than she had been over her elder sisters. Now, she was afraid that Vronsky might confine himself to simply flirting with her daughter. She saw that her daughter was in love with him, and tried to comfort herself with the thought that he was an honorable man and would not do this. But at the same time she knew how easy it is, with the freedom of manners of today, to turn a girl's head, and how lightly men generally regarded such a crime. The week before, and that's an interesting thing that I think a lot of women would agree with now. So I think now, maybe even especially more than then, is kind of being flirtatious and then like leading someone on is what we call it now. You know, lots of guys complain about that, but I've heard lots of girls complain about that too, and I don't know who it would affect more, women or men, if leading someone on, being kind of flirtatious, and then, and as we'll see, Vronsky, again, everyone is all these characters are really great to kind of compare and contrast, and they're all so fleshed out so well. Tolstoy really had an insight into the human soul, I think. But Vronsky is kind of like your titular bad boy. And we'll see that as time goes on, and will become apparent with certain characters. I don't want to spoil things, because it is a great little thing that happens. And it's written so well. But yeah, to turn a girl's head and generally regard it such as a crime. The week before, Kitty had told her mother of a conversation she had with Vronsky during a mazurka, which is it's a type of dance particular to Eastern Europeans. It's kind of like a waltz, but it's, I think, set in 4/4 and not in 3/4. Oh, goodness gracious. Excuse me. This conversation had partly reassured the princess, but perfectly at ease she could not be. Vronsky had told Kitty that both he and his brothers were so used to obeying their mothers that they never made up their minds to do anything of any important undertaking without consulting her. And just now, I impatiently awaiting my mother's arrival from St. Petersburg, as to particularly fortunate, he told her. Kitty had repeated this without attaching any significance to the words, but her mother saw them in a different light. She knew the old lady was expected from day to day, and she would be pleased to her son's choice. And she felt it strange that he should not make his offer through fear of vexing his mother. However, she was so anxious for her marriage itself, and still more for relief from her fears, that she believed it was so. Bitter it was not for the princess to see the unhappiness of her eldest daughter, Dolly, on the point of leaving her husband. Her anxiety over the decision of her youngest daughter's fate engrossed all her feelings. Today, with Levin's reappearance, a fresh source of anxiety arose. She was afraid that her daughter, who at one time, as she fancied, a feeling for Levin, might, from extreme sense of honor, refuse Vronsky, and that Levin's arrival might generally complicate and delay the affair so near being concluded. "Why has he been here long?" Princess asked about Levin as he returned home. "He came today, Mamma. There's one thing I wanted to say," began the princess, and from her serious and alert face, Kitty guessed that it would be. "Mamma," she said, flushing hotly and turning quickly to her. "Please, please don't say anything about that. I know all about it." Again, Kitty is written, they're all written so well, but Kitty really is written like an 18-year-old girl. And it's so just, yeah, talking to her mom, and it's just like, as things change, they really do truly stay the same. She wished for what her mother wished for, but for the motives of her mother's wishes wound her. "I only want to say that to raise hopes—" "Mamma, darling, for goodness sake, don't talk about it. It's so horrible to talk about." "I won't," said her mother, seeing the tears in her daughter's eyes. "But one thing, my love, you promise me. You would have no secrets from me. You won't." "Never, Mamma, none," answered Kitty, flushing a little and looking her mother straight in the face. "But there's no use in my telling you anything, and if I wanted to, I don't know what to say or how. I don't know." No, she could not tell an untruth without those eyes, thought the mother, smiling at her agitation and happiness. The princess smiled that was taking place just now in her soul seemed to the poor child so immense and so important. All right. So here we follow Princess Shcherbowski, which is the mother of Dolly and Natalia and Kitty. Natalia, I don't think, is really that important in the story, but Dolly and Kitty. And she has a lot of things on her mind, and I'm sure it's really hard being the matriarch of a family of 3 girls. And because you would naturally worry about who your kids are going to marry, and she knows, I think, about Dolly not doing well, and how she might not know exactly why, but she knows that she is unhappy and angry, and so she's kind of got that on her mind, and she's got, well, I need to. It's not really my spot, but I care because it's my daughter. I want to make sure she marries someone right, and it's that in Russia, especially at that time, and the whole world at the end of the 19th century was really in a weird place. It's like, we're transitioning into a modern liberal world order going into the 20th century. But we still have these holdovers from the 18th century. Again, it's not exactly my way to totally arrange my daughter's marriage, but I also kind of can't just let her free roam because I love her and I care about her, and so it's an awkward position, and I'm sure a lot of mothers and a lot of parents can sympathize with that. And so you have this, and she's like, oh my God, I got to worry about, well, she's got this guy, Vronsky, who's got a lot of perks, but he might be kind of a flirt. He might just kind of be, leading her on a path and selling some yarns or whatever. And so she's got all these things to worry about. And now this guy, Levin, who she didn't really like, who she perceives of, and I can understand why she would think of him being maybe proud. He might not, he actually isn't. He has very low self-esteem, and that the reason he left was because he felt so bad on the inside that he wasn't worthy of proposing or propositioning Kitty. But it can be obviously perceived of that he's just too good for her, and that's why he left. So again, very well written character in Princess Shadowbowski. So here we are at chapter 13, and we're rounding about how long have we been going? About an hour and 15. So I'll probably do this chapter and then call it for tonight. All right, so we got chapter 13. After dinner until the beginning of the evening, Kitty was feeling a sensation akin to the sensation of a young man before battle. Her heart, because she knows, with what Levin was saying, coming back, and she knows he's going to proposition her. Her heart throbbing violently, and her thoughts would not rest on anything. And she doesn't want to marry him. I mean, I think that was pretty clear that she doesn't really want to marry him. And so she feels bad because she knows he's going to ask her to marry him, and she's going to say no, and that's a hard thing for a girl to do. And I think everyone can kind of sympathize, like, this is going to be an awkward and not a fun thing to do. It's not going to be fun for anyone, because she doesn't dislike Levin. That's the other thing, is that Levin isn't like a complete asshole jerk. He really had a lot of good times with Kitty, and so it kind of makes her feel bad. She felt that this evening, when they would both meet for the first time, would be a turning point in her life. She was continually picturing them to herself, at one moment each separately and then both together. When she mused on the past, she dwelt with pleasure, with tenderness, on the memories of her relations with Levin. The memories of childhood and of Levin's friendship with her dead brother gave a special poetic charm to her relations with him. His love for her, of which she felt certain, was flattering and delightful to her. She was pleasant for her to think of Levin. In her memories of Vronsky, there always entered a certain element of awkwardness. Though he was in the highest degree well-bred and at ease, and though there were some false note, not in Vronsky, was very simple and nice, but in herself, while with Levin she felt perfectly simple and clear. But, on the other hand, directly she thought of the future with Vronsky, there arrived, both before her, a perspective of brilliant happiness. With Levin the future seemed misty. When she went upstairs to dress, she looked into the looking-glass. She noticed with joy at one of her good days that she was in complete possession of all her forces. She needed this, so for when she lay before her, she was conscious of external composure, of free grace in her movements. At 7:30, she had only just gone down to the drawing-room when the footman announced, "Konstantin Demirovitch Levin." The princess was still in her room, and the prince had not come in. So it is to be, thought Kitty, and all the blood seemed to rush to her heart, and she was horrified at the paleness. She had glanced into the looking-glass. At that moment, she knew beyond doubt that she had come early on purpose to find her alone and to make her an offer. And only then, for the first time, the whole thing presented itself in a new, different aspect. Only then she realized that the question did not affect her only, but with whom she would be happy and with whom she loved. But that she would have that moment to wound a man whom she liked, and she wound him cruelly. For what? Because he, dear fellow, loved her, was in love with her, but there was no hope for it, so it must be, and so it would have to be. My God, shall I myself really have to say it to him? She thought. Can I tell him I don't love him? That would be a lie. What am I to say to him? That I love him, that I love someone else? No, that's impossible. I'm going away. She reached the door, and when she heard its step, no, it's not honest. What have I to be afraid of? I have done nothing wrong. And that's true. She hasn't really done anything wrong. I'm sure she feels guilty, but she hasn't done anything wrong. What is it to be? Will it be? I'll tell the truth. And be with him, one can't be at ill at ease. Here he is, she said, saying to herself, seeing his powerful, shy figure with shining eyes, fixed on her, and looked straight into his face, as though imploring him to spare her and give her hand. It's not time yet. I think I'm too early, he said, glancing round the empty drawing-room. When he saw this expectation were realized, that there was nothing to prevent him from speaking, his face became gloomy. Oh no, said Kitty, and sat down at the table. Oh, the awkwardness. And the awkwardness of this whole scene is beautiful. But this was just what I wanted, to find you alone. he began, sitting down, not looking at her as to not lose courage. Mamma will be done directly. She was very much tired yesterday. She talked on, not knowing what her lips were uttering, and talking her supplicating and caressing eyes off him. He glanced at her, she's blushing, and ceased speaking. I told you I did not know whether I'd be here long. That depended on you. She dropped her head lower and lower, not knowing herself what the answer she should make to what was coming. That it depended on you, he repeated. I meant to say, I came for this. To be my wife? Oh, shoot. He brought out, not knowing what he was saying, but feeling that the most terrible thing was said, and stopped short and looked at her. She was breathing heavy, not looking at him. She was feeling ecstasy. Her soul was flooded with happiness. She had never anticipated that the utterance of love would produce such a powerful effect on her, but it lasted only an instant. She remembered Vronsky. She lifted her clear, truthful eyes. And seeing his desperate face, she answered hastily, That can't be. Forgive me. A moment ago, how close she had been to him, what importance in his life, and how aloof and remote from him she had become now. It was bound to be so, he said, not looking at her. He bowed and was meaning to retreat. Oof. Ouch. So, it's a great chapter. It's written very well, and it went exactly as it should have. I don't think you can just show up in town after disappearing for, a couple months. I think it was like 6 months or something like that, maybe more. And then just show up and be like, will you marry me? I mean, what do you think's going to happen? That's going to be an obvious no. But Levin is like in constant turmoil in his heart. He's constantly, and you'll see that throughout the course of the book, he's constantly moving from one idea to another. Not drastic shifts, but constantly feeling like he doesn't belong anywhere. He's in the city, he doesn't like it. He goes out to the country, he likes certain aspects of it, but he still doesn't really belong out in the country. And so he's just this constant wandering soul. And so it's obvious that you can't settle down with someone when you're just constantly wandering from, well, maybe I should do this, well, maybe I should do that, well, maybe we should try this, maybe we should do that. And he just constantly self-deprecating self-doubt that just totally buries him in how he thinks. And that, I think, came very clear in how he proposed. Like, can't look at her, can't even, could you imagine being this poor girl, you haven't seen this guy in a long time, you like this guy, you feel a lot of affection for this guy, but I think only a crazy person would have accepted that sort of proposal, How long have we been going? Hour and 20? This is another great chapter where, if you thought that was awkward, this next chapter is even more awkward. Should I leave on that cliffhanger? This is a horribly awkward chapter, and it's wonderful, and I love everything about it. It's another thing, I call it for the night. Think I'm gonna call it for the night. It is getting pretty late here, and I'm getting kind of tired. So, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this part 2 of my reading of Anna Karenina, giving some commentary along the way. It's a great book. I hope everyone picks it up and reads it. Tolstoy was a master of language and of human perception. So yeah, I hope you all have a wonderful night, and I will see you again next stream. Probably not tomorrow. Probably Friday. Maybe tomorrow. I might come on. If so, it'll be very short. It'll probably only be a few chapters, like 2 or 3. So, all right. I hope you all have a nice night, and I will see you all again.